Are you old enough to remember when dating was more complicated than swiping right? Are you young enough to have never heard of mixtapes? In honor of Valentine's Day, we're exploring how the way people date has changed over the past 50 years, specifically comparing boomers with millennials. Because let's be honest, it's been all downhill since our parents' generation. Join us as we uncover the differences between boomers and zoomers. You might just learn something about your own dating style along the way. All this and more next. This is our channel. Welcome to the first episode of our new series, Boomers vs. Zoomers. For those of you who don't know, boomers are people born between 1946 and 1964, while zoomers, or Generation Z, are people born between 1997 and 2012. But before we get started, hit that like button if you're fired up for this new series. Now back to the topic at hand, dating. If you were a boomer looking for love in the 1970s, you had a few different options when it came to meeting someone. You could meet people organically by going out to parties, playing sports, or through school activities. You could also go on blind dates, which were set up by well-meaning friends or family members, or you could use the personals section of the newspaper to place your own ad seeking a potential partner. If none of those options appealed to you, there was always the chance of bumping into someone at one of the local roller discos. But where do you even find a good roller disco these days? For boomers, meeting someone organically was often the preferred way to start a relationship. This meant that they had the opportunity to get to know someone over time and build a friendship before deciding whether or not they were romantically interested in them. Going on blind dates was also a popular option for boomers. And while it may seem a bit nerve-wracking to us today, it was actually a common way to meet new people back then. Blind dates were often set up by mutual friends who thought that two people would be a good match. And while it may seem a bit outdated today, it was actually a very effective way to meet someone new and potentially start a relationship. Sports and school activities were also a big part of dating in the 1970s. For many boomers, they had their first dates at school dances or through playing sports together. This was a great way for people to get to know each other in a more relaxed setting, and it also helped to build a sense of community. Then comes the most controversial way of meeting someone, the personals section of the newspaper. The personals section of the newspaper was basically like an early version of online dating. People would place ads in the newspaper describing themselves and what they were looking for in a partner. They would then receive responses from people who were interested in meeting them. It was a very public way to put yourself out there, and it required a certain level of courage. But it was also a great way to meet someone who shared similar interests and values. If you ask any boomer about their first date, they'll probably tell you it was a blast. Back in the 1970s, the average first date cost only around $3.15, adjusted for inflation. So it wasn't as expensive as it can be today. Plus, there were plenty of fun and affordable date ideas available. Going to the movies, bowling, or playing mini-golf were all popular options. And if you really wanted to impress your date, you could take them to a record store to pick out their favorite albums. While these may sound like simple and innocent activities, the social norms of the 1970s were quite different from today. For example, it was common for boys to pay for everything on a date, even if their date was working, and physical affection was also more taboo than it is now. Holding hands was often seen as too forward, and couples were expected to wait until they were married to engage in sexual activity. However, despite these restrictions, boomers were still able to have fun and build meaningful relationships on their first dates. As mentioned earlier, the average age of marriage for women in the 1970s was 20 years old. This meant that many people were getting married and starting families much earlier than they do today. There was a lot of pressure on women to get married and have children, and they were often expected to stay at home to take care of the house and the kids. Men, on the other hand, were expected to work and provide for their families. This traditional gender role dynamic often led to an imbalance of power in relationships, with men being seen as the head of the household and women being expected to be submissive to their husbands. But despite these challenges, boomers were still able to forge strong and lasting relationships. They found creative ways to balance their personal aspirations with the expectations of their time, and they learned to communicate and compromise with their partners to create fulfilling partnerships. We can't talk about dating in the 1970s without mentioning the role that technology played, or rather didn't play. Technology was nowhere to be seen on the dating scene back then. There were no smartphones, no social media, and even the internet was in its infancy. All communication had to happen in person or over the phone, and there was no such thing as online dating. While this may seem like a disadvantage to us now, it actually forced people to be more creative when it came to meeting and pursuing potential partners. It was common for people to get to know each other through mutual friends, and they had to rely on word of mouth to spread the word that they were single and looking for a relationship. There was no easy way to find out if someone was single, so people had to do some detective work. They might ask mutual friends or try to find out through other means. Once they did find out that someone was single, they would often approach them in person and ask them out on a date. It was a much more personal and effortful process, but it also led to stronger relationships. Since both parties had to invest so much more time and energy into getting to know each other, there was a higher likelihood that they would feel a deep connection by the time they started dating. Overall, the dating scene in the 1970s was a much different experience than it is today. But it was still filled with the same hopes and dreams of finding love and companionship. Now let's turn the table and talk about the dating scene of today. Welcome to the world of online dating, ghosting, and situationships. Forget the days of handwritten love letters and mixtapes. Today's youth are swiping their way through potential partners on dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. It's a fast-paced, high-tech way to find love in the digital age. According to a survey conducted by the dating app Hinge, around 80% of millennials and Zoomers have used some form of online dating, which begs the question, what are the other 20% up to? It seems that the traditional methods of meeting someone face-to-face are becoming less common, thanks to the convenience of technology. In fact, a study by the Pew Research Center found that nearly a third of U.S. adults have used an online dating site or app, up from only 15% in 2009. But while online dating may be the norm for many, there are still a few holdouts who prefer to meet potential partners in person. Some say that online dating is too superficial, or that it leads to too much choice, which makes it harder to settle down with one person. Others prefer the thrill of meeting someone in person and believe that it leads to more authentic connections. But whatever the reason, there are still a small number of people who are holding out for a more traditional dating experience. So what do each of these generations think about the other's dating style? Well, boomers often view the modern dating scene with a mix of amusement and confusion. They can't help but shake their heads at the antics of the younger generation, from ghosting to situationships. They yearn for the days of face-to-face interaction and handwritten love letters. But perhaps they are missing the point. After all, dating in the digital age is very different from the way it was done in their day, and maybe that's not a bad thing. On the other hand, millennials and Zoomers often view their elders' dating style with a mix of nostalgia and skepticism. They admire the old-fashioned charm of meeting someone in person and building a connection over time. But they also recognize the limitations of this approach. After all, in today's fast-paced world, people are busier than ever, and it can be tough to find the time to meet someone organically. So what's the verdict? Is online dating ruining the art of romance, or is it simply evolving with the times? We'll let you be the judge of that. Thanks for watching. Do you agree with what we said about your generation? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more entertaining and educational content.